I was thinking of the song that you just said, sang about love, serve, and remember. And the idea of it is very beautiful, but actually doing it is rather challenging, isn't it? And I think our spiritual practice has to be more than just inspiring things that function on an ideal level, but it has to be really on the ground. And how do we do it? So you think about loving, okay? Love, from a Buddhist viewpoint, the definition of love is wanting someone to have happiness and the causes of happiness. That's very different than how we usually think of love. We usually think of love as some special kind of bond between people that isn't shared with other people, like the bond on Mother's Day between a mother and her child, or on Father's Day between a father and a child, or in a romantic relationship, or something like that. Yeah. But that kind of love also often borders on attachment, where there's some stickiness with the other person and a lot of expectation about how they should behave, how they should be, how they should treat us. Yeah. You are my son or daughter, you are my mother and father, therefore you should do this, you should do this, and this, and this. You should not do this, and this, and this. Right? And because our minds are so full of these expectations, then we're setting ourselves up for a lot of conflict in these relationships. Because when is somebody going to do everything we want them to do? And when are we going to do everything someone else wants us to? Think about it. Do you want somebody else telling you everything you should do? And are you going to do it? And yet we expect that very often out of the people we love. The love is in quotations, okay? Because it becomes quite a bit of clinging and attachment and expectation. So I think to really love involves removing the self from the love in some way. Yeah. Or maybe I should say removing the self-centeredness from the love. Loving somebody simply because they exist, wanting them to be happy and have the causes of happiness simply because they exist. Not because they make us happy, they make us feel special. They're our child or our parent. Okay. But simply because they're a living being who is exactly like us, who wants to have happiness and not have suffering. And I think this way of loving allows our heart to open and really, with the people that we're closer to, have better relationships with. And also with other people to have more connection with them instead of blocking them out as strangers or as disagreeable people that we're never going to associate with or whatever. This is not so easy, is it? It's not easy. Yeah? Because all the time our self-centered mind is coming up and saying, but, what about me? Me. And that thought like that is what creates so many difficulties in our relationships. Is because we think everything's about me. So the second in your love, serve, and remember, the serve. Okay? Serve is about others, isn't it? Yeah. Serve isn't about me. Of course, we like to try and make it me. I am serving. Aren't I wonderful? Aren't I benevolent and compassionate and kind? And now you owe me a favor. Yeah? So in really serving, again, we have to take the self-centered notion out of it and give and serve where the reward is not the thank you. The reward is not the other person telling us that we're wonderful and special to them. But the reward is simply in doing the action. So the action itself is what brings us joy. Since it's Mother's Day, I'm remembering my mother always talking about enjoying her children. Yeah. So she served us, in the middle of the night when we were sick and screaming and hungry, and did all these things for us. But I think she also wanted to enjoy us. And we weren't always enjoyable. Yeah? And I think when you have kids, I think, her idea of wanting to enjoy her children kind of made things more difficult because you don't always enjoy them. And parents really have to serve their kids. And the way that you serve your kids, if you're really doing things, I think, in a compassionate way as a parent, if you really serve your kids, sometimes your kids can't stand you. Okay? In the sense that, if you see serving your kids as giving them everything they want, are you serving them well? You give your child everything your child wants. Are you serving them well? No, you aren't. You aren't. Because they're going to grow up. They're not going to know how to deal with the frustration of not getting everything they want. They're not going to know how to deal with other people having opposite wants and wishes. And so letting them grow up without having these skills is actually a disservice to the children, not a service. But in the process of sometimes telling your children no, or helping them to learn how to deal with the frustration of not getting what they want, sometimes your kids are not going to like you. Is it true or not true? I mean, I remember saying, when I wanted something, and my parents would say no. I always used the girl across the street. Yeah, because they used the girl across the street because I was supposed to be nice like her and good-mannered like her. So then when I didn't get what I want, Jeannie's parents let her have it. So I played my parents' trick right back on them, How come I can't? Her parents let her have it. And I whined and I cried. And my parents didn't back down. And so it made me, realize that I can't get everything I want in my life. And I think that's something valuable to learn. And how do you deal with that frustration? So I think when you really serve from the heart, just the doing of the action is what brings you the joy. Because you can't control how the other person responds to your action. Okay. You don't know if your kid's going to like you or love you, or if somebody else was going to be happy or sad. But you serve for the beauty of serving. And then the remember. That one of the three, I wonder the most what that means. Remember what? And what is the purpose of remembering? And what effect does remembering have on us? There's some kind of remembering that is very, very essential, where we learn from the past, we learn from history, we understand people and groups and societies by knowing what came before. That kind of remembering is useful. There's another kind of remembering where we get stuck in the past and we hold on to the past and to our past pain, bringing that pain forward into the present and the future and continuing to dislike or even hate the person who we see as causing us the pain in the past. Or we hold on to the past pleasure trying to recreate it, whereas it can never be recreated. What has happened is over. So the kind of remembering that keeps us stuck in the past is actually quite detrimental to our well-being. And I see over and over again how we latch on to things that we learned in the past and let that conditioning make us into karmic wind-up toys. Excellent phrase. Karmic wind-up toys. Yeah. Where we just remember something and let it condition us again and again. And we develop a self-image about it. And we develop a notion about humanity due to it. And we limit our way of thinking about life to just those few things, limited things, very often dysfunctional things that we learned a long time ago. Are you getting what I mean? I mean, the thing that always comes to my mind was when I taught school, and I was a third grade teacher one year, and little Tyrone couldn't learn to read. And it wasn't because Tyrone was dumb. He wasn't dumb. But people told him he was dumb. And that conditioned him, and he remembered that, and he developed an identity. Oh, I'm too stupid. I'll never learn to read. And that thought limited him. And so we too may have learned things as we were growing up, developed some kind of image of ourselves or of the world. And then that kind of memory, that kind of identity that we created, puts us in a box and keeps us limited and trapped. So that kind of remembering is not what we want to do. Okay? So that's why, love, serve, remember. Remember what? How? And then I also thought, in the Sanskrit and Pali, the two Buddhist languages, the word for remember is also translated as mindfulness, which is now the latest psychology, scientific buzzword. Everybody wants to be mindful. And it's the same word as to remember. Okay. Except what we're trying to remember, what we're trying to be mindful of, is of our values and principles, of the way that we have decided we want to live our life. We are mindful that we want to love without clinging and without attachment. We are mindful that we want to serve without expectation of reward. We are mindful that we don't want to harm others in our efforts to love them and serve them. Okay. We are mindful that we want to keep good ethical conduct ourselves, because if we don't, it's going to be very difficult to benefit anybody, because nobody's going to trust us. So here, mindfulness means remembering the good ways that we want to live and holding those in mind from moment to moment, so that we can live according to our own values and principles. And if we do that, then our heart is at peace. I think a lot of times the guilt and the bad feelings come because we haven't lived in accordance with our own heart and our own values. So there's confusion, there's doubt, there's guilt and remorse. But when we are mindful of what we know is beneficial and live according to it, then already there's peace in the heart. So I better get back to the theme of Mother's Day. Otherwise somebody's going to get mad at me, and my reputation will suffer. So, I do prison work, and there's starting to be some good books about inmates, that are being published. I'm currently reading one that is lovely. It's called Shakespeare Saved My Life. I highly recommend it. It's about a Shakespearean professor who goes and teaches Hamlet and Othello and, Macbeth and so on in the ad seg, in the isolation unit of a supermax prison. But this one here, called Finding Freedom, it's by Jarvis Masters. He's on death row in San Quentin. And Jarvis grew up in a family where both parents were crack addicts. In another book he wrote called This Bird Stole My Wings, he talks about being a little kid and going in his parents' drawers and finding little balloons of different colors arranged in different ways. And one time he played with them and rearranged them, and he got in a whole lot of trouble after that. So he learned he could play with them when his parents weren't around, and then he put them back exactly the way they were. They were filled with crack. His parents were dealing. He was often neglected. He and his 3 sisters were often neglected. In this book, he tells a story of, because his mom usually was away at night and slept during the day. There was violence in the home. His father came in, and his mother, sensing what was happening, told all the kids to hide under the bed. And the father wanted to he was just, intoxicated and wanted to beat somebody up. And she took the brunt of it. She wouldn't let him get to the kids at all. She sheltered them, even though she was completely beaten to a pulp by the end of it. So this is the kind of thing he witnessed as he was growing up. Difficult. Yeah, really difficult. And when he was incarcerated, his mother died. So he wrote an entry in the book about that. I thought I would read it. My mother died while I was here in prison, before I could spend much time with her. It was at a point where I finally had the strength to talk to her about the experiences that had led me to my very long separation from her as a child. He had been running away and got in trouble and placed in foster home, so was separated from her. The greatest moment I could have given her would have been to tell her that through it all I loved her. Many people think of her as someone I'm not supposed to love, a woman who abandoned and neglected me. But my own memory of her isn't tainted in that way. When I was young, I felt extremely sad for her, and later I saw her as a victim. My last memory of the two of us together is of watching my mother hold her newborn grandchild for the first time. She sat on the couch, rocking little Danta, her eyes filled with love and memories of all of us. Then she wept, singing one of her favorite songs. It was a song by Billie Holiday. As a child, I had heard her sing the same lyrics. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child who's got his own. And I was very touched by that because in another part of the book, I couldn't find it to read it to you. He was telling how he heard about his mother's death. Because the chaplains usually get the call and they have to go find the inmate and break the bad news. So whenever the chaplain comes out on the yard, most of the people don't want to even know he's there because they know it's bad news for somebody. And so, the chaplain told him about his mother's death. And he was so shaken by it, that, and in prison, you don't show emotions. It's considered weakness to show emotion. But he was sobbing, and his cellie, his cellmate, said to him, kind of like he indicated here, why do you love her? She neglected you when you were little. Why are you so upset when she's dying? And he said, because through it all, she was also kind to me. And she also loved me. And I love her. And I was so touched by that because he had the power to forgive. He had the power to let go of his own agenda, of how he wanted his mother to be, and to accept his mother for exactly who she was, crack addict and all, and to love her for who she was, and to see that even somebody who has problems like that also has kindness. That people are not all good or all bad. That people are mixtures of all different sorts of things. So rather than cling to the good qualities and idealize somebody, which is a setup for pain, and rather than look at their faults and shut our heart down because we can't see their kindness, he was really able to hold both in his relationship with his mother and to love her through the whole thing. And I really respect that. To me it is a model for all of us. Because it's so easy for us to make hard and fast images of somebody and then always speak about them in the same way. I mean, he could have just said, my mother abused me and she neglected me and I hate her, and made a whole identity of that, I'm a child of a mother who was a crack addict, blah, 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 blah. And, so therefore feel sorry for me, therefore don't hold me responsible for what I do, therefore, da-da-da-da-da. But he didn't do that. He was able to see her kindness, see all the conditioning that affected her, understand why she was the way she was, and that if circumstances had been different, she probably wouldn't have been different. She would have been different as well. So I think in really loving people, whether it's our parents or kids or whoever it is, to be able to care for them as a whole entire person. Yeah? Their good qualities and their bad qualities. And in that way, we can forgive them, we can rejoice at what we share with them, and we can release painful things and not set ourselves up for more pain. So we can try, can't we? Yeah? So let's go forward and try.